Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Game Plan. This episode is about the Houston Texans versus the Baltimore Ravens. As a fan of the NFL, as a fan of football, this is my favorite game of the week, the most interesting game of the week. These teams match up a lot closer than you think they might given their records. If you're new to this show, here's what I do. I basically quickly break through and break down the player injuries, the key player injuries from both teams. I look at the key stats, the key gambler stats. I'll explain those. We put that into a soup, we mix it all together, and we give you paths to success, paths to victory for both the Texans and the Ravens. And at the end, we close out the video with our fantasy football projections using my daily fantasy football analytic algorithm that I wrote. As I always say at this time, if you could give me 2 seconds for 2 clicks, a like and a subscribe. You know, we put a lot of work into these videos, but honestly, we can't even give you links to different sources of information because those are blocked for us. We need your help to become a bigger channel, to basically make these videos bigger. That helps us, and I think it would help everybody out there as well. But the first thing I like to do at this point, let's dig into the injuries for both the Texans and the Ravens. There are somewhat injuries for the Texans that make me a little uncomfortable. Obviously, Will Fuller, I think he's a key to this game. I hope he plays. I know he's back at practice. I don't love that Howard and Tunzel are both questionable when both of the offensive tackles are questionable and banged up. Yeah, I think that's a little bit of an issue. Deshaun Gibson, Brandley Roby, I don't love that those guys are questionable either, but at least we don't see any doubtfuls. At least we don't see any outs. For the Ravens now, we have Marquise Brown. He's been playing, though. I think he'll be okay. You know, I don't love the, again, Pierce, your nose tackle. You need to be able to stop that Houston Texans running game. They're 4th in the league, I think, at this point in terms of yards accumulated. And then Earl Thomas, you don't like to see him on the injury report either. But again, if, you know, any of these players, you know, weren't to play, I would say that Baltimore looks like the healthier team to me, at least in terms of, you know, recent injuries. I know everybody has some people on IR. You know, I didn't even mention J.J. Watt, for example. But, you know, I think the advantage probably goes towards the Ravens in terms of who's banged up. And again, I think that's more because of the offensive line. And I do think that the Texans need Fuller in this game, which we'll talk about in a little bit. As for the key statistics, these are in terms of yards accumulated. I like to put matchup versus matchup. So you see at the top line there, the pass offense of the Texans is ranked 12th. The pass defense for the Ravens is ranked 20th. Although since Peters has gotten there, they're playing a little bit better. So I think that's kind of an artificially low ranking compared to where they are today. Pass defense for the Texans is 29th compared to the 20th ranked Baltimore passing offense. Then you look at the run offense versus run defense. You know, 4th in terms of offense for the Texans, but 8th for the Ravens. And then 1st for the Ravens in terms of run offense, but 3rd in ranked defense for the Ravens. So what you're seeing is strength versus strength and weakness versus weakness in this matchup. If I had to give an edge to anyone, I would give a slight edge here to Baltimore because I think that their passing game will be able to exploit some things with against Houston. Although, you know, depending on if Gibson and Roby play, maybe that'll be a little bit better for Houston. Similarly, I like the run offense for the Ravens, and I think the run defense is going to be difficult for the Houston Texans to handle. But respect to Houston, I really think in terms of matchup and where these categories go, they're pretty close. That leads me to the next thing, which is the gambler statistics. If you're new to this show, you know, I say this every week, but basically professional gamblers look at a few key things first, okay? Everybody has their own system, myself included, but everybody, you know, makes it a lot more complicated. But the top line things for gamblers a lot of times are yards per play. How many yards do you gain per play, right? How powerful is your offense and defense? How many yards do you give up? Then 3rd down and 4th down conversion. Okay, you can gain yards, but what happens in key situations? Are you good on 3rd and long? Can you advance the ball, right? How good are you at staying on the field? Then you look at red zone touchdown percentage. How good are you if you stay on the field once you get into the red zone? Do you fall to bend, don't break defenses? Are you taking a lot of field goals, or are you scoring that touchdown? And then lastly, you have the turnover margin. And if we look at these, I got to say they're pretty similar. Again, I give a slight advantage to the Ravens. You see that the Texans average 6.1 yards per play. That's pretty good. The Ravens give up 5.8 yards per play. That's decent, right? Then you look defensively, the Texans match the Ravens defense at 5.8 yards per play, but the Baltimore Ravens offense is a little bit better at 6.3 yards per play. So when I say a slight advantage, we're talking about 0.2 yards per play. That's pretty darn close. You look at the offense and defensive 3rd down percentage, the conversion percentage. For defense, the lower percentage is better, right? You want to only have your opponent convert like 10% of the time, then you're off the field 90% of the time. So lower percentages are better for defense. But you see they're actually pretty similar here. 46 for Houston's offense versus 48 for Baltimore's offense. Then defensively, you're at 44% for Houston's defense and 42% for Baltimore. I mean, that's pretty much a wash. Now, where I do see a difference is in the red zone defensive percentages. You see that the Baltimore Ravens get off the field about 48% of the time, forcing teams to kick field goals, which is pretty decent. That's less than half the time they're giving up touchdowns in the red zone. Well, Houston, they're giving up touchdowns 2/3 of the time. That's not good enough, especially against a team as efficient as the Baltimore Ravens. Houston, this isn't exactly rocket science. It's not some great revelation, but they need to shore up that red zone touchdown percentage for sure defensively. Just in terms of pure analytics, I see this as a very even matchup. And when the Texans opened up, I believe they were 5-point underdogs. It was Baltimore -5 against Houston. I thought, you know what, this looks like a field goal game to me. And although I think this could be a coin flip, if the Houston Texans had not had a bye week last week, I'd probably lean more towards the Ravens at home. But Deshaun Watson versus Lamar Jackson, this is such a good matchup. I think we're going to get points. I think it's going to be an exciting game to watch. I think it's going to be even a 15-14 game is exciting sometimes. But I think we'll get both teams in the high 20s, maybe in the 30s. I think Houston is that team that can match up very well with Baltimore. A couple of weeks ago when I did this video for the Baltimore Ravens and the New England Patriots. Now, I'll admit I picked the Patriots in that game, but all the analytics were stacking up for Baltimore, and I admitted as much. I just said, hey, I'm not going to bet against the Patriots this time. Well, I got to say, this time Houston stacks up really well. I actually think the Ravens match up better against New England than they do against Houston. Houston is just a team that is built to give the Ravens some issues. Again, it's why I'm loving this game. I think it's going to be a close one. For me, it's a coin flip either way. I pick Houston against the spread because I like the 5-point advantage. I tend to think maybe Baltimore will eke this game out with a late field goal or something like that. But to me, and let's just move on to the game plans, the path to success. Let's talk about the Texans' path to success first, right? I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, like I said. I think taking deep shots is going to be big to DeAndre Hopkins, and I think Will Fuller has to be in the game for the Texans to really be able to keep up with the number one scoring offense of the Baltimore Ravens this season. Now, why do I say Will Fuller? Two reasons. One, because Deshaun Watson likes throwing to him deep, first of all. He did have that 3-touchdown game, and maybe that seems like an outlier to people, but I actually do watch all the games. I see a lot of Texans games, and even in the games where Fuller catches maybe 1 touchdown or no touchdowns, he's always this close to catching more, right? So, close is only good in horseshoes and hand grenades, as they say. But Fuller, what he does, even if he doesn't catch those deep passes, he stretches the defense. When he stretches the defense, they have to respect him on the other side of the field. That makes DeAndre Hopkins more potent. So I do think that Will Fuller has to play in this game. If he doesn't, then Stills better step the hell up. I can tell you that. The second one, red zone defense for the Texans needs to be ratcheted up, especially against a strong Baltimore rushing attack. They need to be able to basically stop Lamar Jackson, make him throw into tight windows. Let's see. Hyde, I don't love his projections. We'll see in the fantasy football projections moving forward here. I don't love Carlos Hyde or Duke Johnson against the Baltimore Ravens defense. I think they're going to try to make Deshaun Watson one-dimensional. Good luck with that, because Deshaun Watson, as well as Lamar Jackson, both of them are very just dynamic players. I do like Watson a little bit more as a passer at this point, and maybe that has more to do with just having DeAndre Hopkins and potentially Will Fuller to throw to. Carlos Hyde, I do think that even if the Texans are only getting like 3 yards per carry, you got to stay patient with that run game. You gotta just basically give some support to the deep passing game. If they get one-dimensional, then Baltimore can start dialing up blitzes, which gives Deshaun Watson a little bit less time to throw. You need to run the ball. You need to be patient, even if you're not getting the yardage there. I can't stress that enough. Establish the run and establish your willingness to run. I think that's a better way to say it. Even if the run's not jiving, I don't know why I said that. Even if the run's not going well, establish the run, establish your willingness to run so that they respect your play calling as kind of an even distribution. Hopkins, I say, will need to win the matchup, and like I said before, if Fuller doesn't play, Stills better step up and give Hopkins some support, more so in the last couple of weeks with Will Fuller out. Now, what is the path to success for the Ravens? Look, the Ravens are right now on my power rankings the number 2 team. I think Houston's somewhere around 8 to 10 right now on the power rankings. If Baltimore wins this game, I will say that they'll either be number 1 or tied for number 1. They're playing such good football right now. But like I said, NFL matchups, Houston, I think, gives Baltimore some problems. So let's talk about Baltimore's path to success here. Make the Texans one-dimensional. I said this, when I was talking about the Texans. Basically stop that run. Make Deshaun Watson beat you. Make him beat you over the top. Can he do that? Yes, he has the ability to do that, right? But make him beat you over top. The Texans will do their best to contain Lamar Jackson. What that means usually, it could mean a couple of things depending on the defensive scheme. It could mean your edge rushers for the Texans are going to, take deeper rushes and basically make him be the pocket passer. Of course, if they do that and they run too far up the field, that just gives more opportunity for Lamar Jackson to scramble out. But that also means that sometimes, and a lot of times, defenses will have a spy. They'll have a middle linebacker or safety or somebody crashing in and spy. The Baltimore Ravens, and they're used to seeing this, I know, but the Baltimore Ravens are going to want to basically exploit that spy. If it's a linebacker, you're probably going to want to run, Mark Andrews over the top in a seam route, maybe like a 15-yard seam, just pick on that, or Boykin or whoever. If it's, a safety, then you run Boykin, you run Snead deep, and you hit those guys. The Texans, number 3 on my list. The Texans have done well against tight ends this season, which helps in this matchup, right? Because the Ravens like to use their tight ends. If Boykin or Snead can make them pay in seam and deep routes. That's what I was saying before, especially if they're using a safety, if the Texans are using a safety as a spy, make them pay in the intermediate to deep middle of the field, and I think the Ravens will be able to kind of run through this game. And lastly, that takes me to my point number 4. Just keep on running. You're the number 1 rushing team for a reason. Ingram's great. Edwards is great. I love Hill. I love basically every running back that they've ever put in there. I love. And then on top of that, you have Lamar Jackson, who I think is a better version of RG3, who happens to be Lamar Jackson's backup. Lamar Jackson is now what RG3 should have been in his career. He's playing great. He's an MVP candidate for a reason. This Ravens team is going to give everybody matchup issues. Teams like the Texans, like the Kansas City's Chiefs, which we saw earlier in the season, with really potentially explosive passing games, are going to be the ones that give the Ravens a little bit more trouble than, say, a Patriots who play strong defense. But teams that play strong defense can be run on. So again, we're talking about matchups here. People might be, Ravens fans might be saying, "Oh, what the hell? We're way better than the Texans." Well, in terms of rankings, I might agree with that. But again, matchup issue, this could be a matchup issue. And I just think this is going to be a close, exciting game. I hope you can sense my excitement. It's going to be awesome. Let's close this video out with my fantasy football projections. We'll start with the Texans. Deshaun Watson has a strong projection. I think that's probably 2 touchdowns for him at least. Duke Johnson, Carlos Hyde, I mentioned. I don't love the projections here, but I do hope that the Texans, for the sake schematically in this game, do commit to trying to run regardless of how successful they are. I like Hopkins. I love Fuller this week, especially as a daily fantasy buy or as a bottom line fantasy football flex play for everybody out there. Given his injury, he's actually probably out there in a lot of leagues. I think he's somewhere hovering in the 50% rostered at ESPN at this point. Kenny Stills, I don't love. Darren Fells, that's a fringe start, but keep in mind Fells, I think, is still leading the league in tight ends in terms of touchdowns received for a tight end. So Watson looks for him on the goal line, and you got to respect that. He has multiple games with 2 touchdown passes, so you got to look into that. And I don't really like either defense this week, so that's not to say that I don't like the Texans defense, period. Just not this week, not against the number 1 scoring offense in the league. For the Ravens, fantasy football-wise, I like Lamar Jackson. That 27, you remember Deshaun Watson was at a 20 if we looked at the last slide here. Lamar Jackson's at a 27. I think they'll have a similar game in terms of passing touchdowns, but I think Jackson's going to give you more rushing yards as he always does. Ingram, I like. I think he'll get in the end zone this week, 14. Edwards, I don't love at 4.16. Marquise Brown, I think, is a touchdown candidate for sure. I like him as a start. Willie Snead, Miles Boykin, I mentioned in the game plan, I would like to see that one of these guys win a matchup and get in the end zone, but I do not project them to do so. Mark Andrews, I think, will have a nice game. And if you're looking for a daily fantasy sleeper, I even think Miles Boykin could be there. If you're talking about, on the goal line being disciplined and trying to make sure that, Mark Andrews doesn't get a close touchdown. Well, you got a close, easy touchdown, I should say, maybe on a play action pass. You gotta stay at home on Miles Boykin and Hayden Hurst and whoever's. I'm sorry, not Miles Boykin, Boyle at tight end, or Hayden Hurst or any of those guys, because they'll be able to beat you on the goal line as well. You got to stay at home on those, which only makes the running game more potent because you have to respect the passing game there. And then once again, defense and special teams don't love the matchup for the Ravens. I do think this is going to be a higher scoring game. Respect to the Ravens defense. I know that they've been playing better as of late. I've seen it. Respect, but I don't like this matchup again, once I said, or I'll say that once again. So there you go. That takes me through the whole video. We do have the Pittsburgh Steelers and Cleveland Browns game on Thursday Night Football out. We'll also be following up with a couple more games. So if you like this series, keep it going. We're going to have a multiple every week. I'm trying to add more and more, but I only have so many hours in the day. These videos take a while to prepare, as I'm sure you can all imagine. Once again, please like and subscribe to help us grow our channel and unlock some interactive features for you, the viewer, and we'll catch you on another episode soon. Thanks, everyone.